So, welcome back everybody to Boogie Nights. We were gone for a couple of weeks as we were figuring out how to deal with YouTube's incredible copyright policy, which kind of prevents us from streaming any trailers or films anymore. But that's okay. We'll move that to another platform, and we'll use this show right here on YouTube purely now for live events. And today we have a special guest on the show by the name of Evil Antonio, who's joining us to talk about crime films and especially how different countries handle the genre. So Antonio, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing good. How you doing, Dave?
Uh,
I'm
I'm,
sorry.
I'm, I'm doing pretty good. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a filmmaker and a YouTuber. Been doing it for about 2 years on the YouTube side. Got a little over 500 reviews, I think,
Wow,
and just hit 400 subscribers a little while ago. So I've got a 400 blows review coming out soon for that.
that's
And
awesome.
yeah.
I'll show people a little title card to your YouTube channel as well as your Twitter account.
Oh, well, my Twitter account's a lot better than my YouTube.
Oh, well,
I have
that
like over 1,000 on Twitter.
that's awesome.
Yeah, so
So
I'm doing.
you told me on email that you wanted to do an item on how countries handle the crime genre in film for a while now, and I was wondering what fascinates you about this topic.
Oh yeah, well, I thought it was really interesting. I've always been a big fan of foreign films because in America, a lot of people don't really care what goes on in the rest of the world, and so a lot of things that might be unique to just America, people here see it and misconstrue it as being normal everywhere across the board because they
Sure.
haven't traveled or they haven't, what have you. And so that's why I really like films, especially foreign films, because it gives you a glimpse into other societies and how they function. In particular, the crime film, I think, is a very good gauge for seeing how societies function because they're a very popular genre, one that's kind of universally popular, I think. Pretty much everyone has a take on the crime film that they can do with different little nuances. And also, criminal organizations from the top to the bottom, they run very similar to legal organizations that are in place. So high up, if you're doing a movie about like the high level gang members who are running the place, that could very well be uh, similar in a way to how high up people in governments
Uh,
portray
so,
stuff
so,
like
so
that.
how accurate do you think films, portray actual gang and crime culture?
Oh, as far as to the accuracy of how accurately they capture it, I'd say it would depend on the filmmaker, but probably not very much. I mean, art does reflect real life in quite a few ways, but just because it's a film about crime doesn't mean it reflects real life crime in that place. They
Right.
could be using it to stand for something else.
Fair enough.
Uh,
Yeah.
for example, a really good set to look at would be The Godfathers 1 and 2, Outrage and Beyond Outrage, and then Election and Election 2. The Godfather 1 and 2 being an American crime film series, um, Outrage being a really wonderful Takashi Kitano Japanese Yakuza film, and Election being a Hong Kong triad film. Both very kind of organized gangs and how they run and operate. And I think each one reflects, in a sense, how the different societies function. For example, in America, I think there's a very kind of there's still very puritanical roots here,
Mm-hmm.
due to the nature of the founding of the country. And so, due to that and the history of the different censorship codes in America, I think there's a weird fascination we have with criminals and crime in general. We really like it on the one hand, and we kind of revel in watching people be bad people. But on the other hand, we never want them to ever succeed at it.
Right.
There's something about us that feels guilty about them getting away with it. And so they always have to be taken down at the end.
That's it.
Great
Is that
examples of that would
different?
be
Is there a
hard.
different country to country of this need to wanting the criminal to fail, and are there countries where it might be um, where people are more inclined to see like, oh, I want to see this criminal succeed?
Well, there are two very good examples of that, I would say. They're pretty old, but they're good. One would be Bicycle Thief, the Italian neo-realist film, and the other one would be Pickpocket, uh, which was a Bresson film from France.
Yeah.
And what's
S-
great about both of them is, and why I love them so much, is that Bicycle Thief has a very sympathetic view of the criminal, showing kind of how the cycle of crime starts. And we'll probably give a little spoiler here for these two films, but it starts with it's wretched poverty everywhere. People are like, you have 30 guys fighting for one job. This guy gets it, so they have to pawn off their blankets so he can get his bicycle back. And the first day on the job, it gets stolen. And so he
right.
spends the entire movie with his kid trying to get it back. And at the end, he gets so fed up, he goes and tries to steal a bike and gets caught. And then of course, after that, the guy who catches him sees his kid crying, and they let him go. And it's this really kind of heartfelt moment where you see just how this cycle perpetuates. And so it makes you feel for the criminal in a way you might not have before in a film like, say, Scarface or Goodfellas, where you
Well,
like the
that's it.
criminal,
But
but he got his comeuppance.
is it not like that in the Bicycle Thief? The guy is kind of forced by circumstance and not so much driven by, take a Scarface, which is driven by the need to improve your lifestyle.
Well, that's what both of them were driven by, really. They were both in terrible situations and wanted to get out of them.
That's true,
And both
actually.
of them resorted to crime. Really, Scarface was just more successful at it.
Right.
Uh, but because of, how crime works in America, he can't succeed at it. He has to be taken down. And so we introduced this element of hubris to it, where he has to rise too high and get too proud of himself, and then get taken down in a way that makes you feel like you like him as a character, but you almost kind of feel like he deserved what he got.
Right.
There's not much remorse for him at the end of the movie.
I get it. Um,
Uh,
h-
but
how about
and then
Pickpocket? I was looking at that one, and that looks
right,
really, really cool.
and with Pickpocket, it's even more interesting because they go past sympathy. In Bicycle Thief, remember, he still gets caught, and there's still kind of a punishment aspect to it, where he's humiliated in front of his kid,
Hmm.
and so there's still an element of crime doesn't pay there. But what's fascinating about Pickpocket, and I would say French progressive views on crime in general, is it doesn't seem to have that element at all from my reading of the film. He doesn't really seem to be in all that much need at the beginning to pickpocket. He kind of just seems to be doing it because he likes it.
It
And
seems
he
to be
starts
like
reading up on the philosophy of thieving, and he joins a group of thieves, and they learn the intricacies of pickpocketing.
that's what
And
I got from it as well. Like especially the focus on the intricacies of the dexterity of pickpocketing, and
oh yeah,
it seemed much the same. Like some person could get an obsession with handling cards, for instance.
yes. And but what fascinated me most was the very end of the film, the last line he has, where he's gotten caught, he's in jail, and the woman that he's loved this entire time is there, and they kiss through the bars, and he has a line that's like, finally, I took all this way and I got to where I wanted. and it's almost like celebratory, like he's glad that he did what he did because he got to get what he wanted in the end, even though it turns out he stole from his own mother, you know. And there's something about that where, like, every sense, like looking at it logically, in every sense of the word, we really shouldn't like this guy. We really shouldn't feel good for him. And yet the way they spin it at the end, you're kind of like, way to go, man, you did it.
Right on. So, one particular area of cinema I'm completely not familiar with is Asian cinema. It's in general a little bit too weird for my taste, but especially in the crime film. You already mentioned it a little bit, but can you go into that a little bit?
Okay. Well, with crime films and Asian culture, I think they kind of they reflect a lot of the societal pressures that are on the people there. They have a lot of different kind of repressions and such. Speaking of the triad film Election in particular, to start there and then move to Outrage, I guess. One way I think you could view the film is kind of seeing, because it kind of almost feels like this could be something that's going on in the Chinese government behind the scenes. Because if you follow Chinese politics at all on, say, channels like China Uncensored, where they go into all the dirty stuff that's going on there. In fact, the current leader of China, I believe his name is like Xi Jinping, he's actually trying to like completely eliminate this other faction that's in China. And so he's doing this whole anti-corruption campaign, and he's going through the ranks. And at the head of the Chinese government, there isn't one person. It's like the Politburo, which is like 8 people that control the whole thing. And so I think the Election is very kind of it has a lot of elements of like that, of that kind of political. It's a very political crime film, I guess you could say, because it's all about winning votes and getting the people on your side. And eventually law enforcement does get involved. Spoiler alert. I believe towards the second film, one of the people starts inadvertently being forced to work with government officials to do what they want. And so there's this whole kind of, I guess you could say, Game of Thronesian aspect to it that I would say is very reflective of the political culture that's in China.
Right.
And then with a film like Outrage, I think that would reflect not so much the government system, but more maybe like the corporate style of Japanese businesses and maybe even schooling, where it's very kind of, it's a very hierarchical, and you do what your boss says no matter what, and all that stuff, because basically what happens in it is Takashi Kitano is this kind of mid-level gangster, and he's told by his higher-ups that they have to purposefully piss off this other gang so that they can start a war with them. And so they have to do all this crazy stuff, and compared to other crime films like The Godfather, where it's very much a familial sense, where these guys are a family, or the Goodfellas, where they're all buddies and they hang out together. You don't get that feeling with Outrage or Takashi Kitano's other films. It's very much a business, and the people they're all, they all know their role within the hierarchy of their business, and they all go about doing what they need to do, following the orders that they're given.
Right. All right. I think what is also a very interesting sort of concept is when a film gets remade. So you mentioned Scarface as one of the films you wanted to talk about, and you were very specific about it being the original, though you then said like possibly also the new one. And what's interesting for me, and I was kind of like thinking that you would go into how a crime film reflects on society. How do the differences between the two films reflect on the differences in those two times of society?
Oh, I would love to, but I have to make a confession in that I haven't seen the original yet. I meant to do that, but got caught up. But I do know that the drug of choice changed.
Right.
I believe wasn't it alcohol and bootlegging that was in the original?
It must be in it was in 1932, as my notes say, because I've also not seen it. I think so. Let's make that a follow-up one then. We'll do an
Yeah,
entire one on the
next time
differences
I get
between
on, I'll make sure to do
Scarface.
that and talk about that one.
So what else? Like we had Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man. Now this looked to me like it was pure trash. Was that ever meant to be a serious film?
Um, Probably not. It's I believe it's actually made by Lucio Fulci, who, if you don't know, also did Zombie 2, the one where a zombie fights a shark.
Right on. So this is kind of in the Ed Wood category of filmmakers.
Yes, he's known for doing a ton of exploitation films, but this one was actually I heard about it through an interview with Edgar Wright, where he talked about cop films that influenced him. And oh, I'm sorry, is Ruggero Deodato, which is
Right.
even worse than Fulci. I thought it was Fulci. It was Deodato. Deodato did Cannibal Holocaust,
Oh, great. Yeah.
although it was written by Fernando Di Leo, who did a bunch of other really good crime films. But they're basically these two pretty boy cops, and they just go around like killing people and stuff, like very kind of like dangerous cop work, you know.
Right on.
So
I'm trying to think.
I guess what I do find interesting about that, um, although I don't know how to compare it with the Italians in particular, but I know in America, I do think that the prevalence of cop films and how cops are portrayed uh, has kind of led to a mentality regarding cops, that cops are kind of always in the right, and they always, you know, they're like these heroes in the line, constantly in the line of fire, you know, and doing all this stuff. I guess you could call it the Dirty Harry effect, where even if they go over the line, people still view it as like okay because they're a cop and there's some hypothetical situation that they might one day need to stop, and we can't ever hinder them in any way, or else they won't be able to stop that future rougher crime.
right. Yeah, Dirty Harry.
Yeah, like Dirty Harry and the Death Wish series. I mean, both of them went on to have like 6, 7, 8 films,
Yeah.
and they were throughout what the 70s and the 80s.
I think so. Yeah.
And Death Wish in particular, if you look, because that was mostly at least the first one was New York, and I think Dirty Harry was almost always L.A., but Death Wish was in New York, and New
Death
York had
Wish
a
is
huge crime problem during that time.
Yeah, and Death Wish for me is like such an bizarre concept as well. Just like a guy who, you know, something happens to him and he shoots up the whole neighborhood because all the criminals live in the same neighborhood, kind of thing. You know,
Right, and he
because
doesn't even go after he doesn't even go after like directly for the people that did it. He just goes after random criminals.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
Michael
and
Caine
like people
actually
that
did
wronged him personally, like it's a
yeah,
personal thing.
yeah. Michael Caine, believe it or not, actually did a film very much like that recently.
Yeah, what
And
was it
I
called?
actually
Like, was it? Well,
it
he was called
was
Harry, obviously, because he was always called Harry. But
Harry Brown is what
yeah,
it was called.
because I wondered if that in any way connected to the films he did in the 70s, where he was always called Harry as well, and he was this sort of spy character with a jazz bar.
Well, he could be. I know he had did one film back in the 70s, but his character died in that film, so I don't know how he would have lived to be an old man from there.
Right,
It could have been just a kind of an homage reference to it. That film was Get Carter.
right.
Although he wasn't named Harry, he was named Jack Carter. So, but yeah, I mean, if you look at Harry Brown, the beats are very much the same
Hmm.
as the beats in Death Wish. Although he's an elderly man, and his best friend gets killed by a bunch of teenagers from a rough neighborhood. This public housing projects that they clearly highlight in the London area. I don't know if you know where they actually are or not.
Oh
And he
yeah.
does the very similar thing. He doesn't so much go after just the people that wronged him. He goes after the youth criminal element in general.
Right.
And I think the fact that he's an older gentleman is very interesting too, because maybe that plays to some fears of the baby boomer generation in London, where it was very much, I don't know how safe it always was. I'm not very familiar with the London area, but it was very much kind of a calm, quiet area, where not much happens. And now they're old and nothing makes sense anymore. And the youth are a lot more dangerous now.
Sure.
Um,
I mean, I would
uh,
compare London very much to New York in that way. Like, it's a metropolis city that it has a crime element and a very strong crime element. And, like the papers as they report it, I think in February they started reporting there was already 4 stabbings amongst youth in the estates, which is what you would call the public housing projects.
yeah, and I
You
also
know,
heard there's a lot of youth unemployment there too, as well, right?
oh yeah.
Isn't that why y'all had a bunch of protests there? I think a year or two back.
Well, that was actually interesting because when I came to London, and I think that's actually 4 years back, there was indeed these riots going on, and yeah, it was insane, and that was definitely an unsafe situation, But no, there's definitely, I haven't seen the Michael Caine film, but that definitely describes what lives in sort of the culture today here in London. Yeah.
Yeah, and so in that sense, Harry Brown can very much be this wish fulfillment fantasy for
Yeah.
the older generation that still has the disposable income to go to the movies. Where nothing makes sense to them anymore. They don't trust the youth of today. They think they're dangerous, and they just want to, well, they don't necessarily want to go out and do that, but I bet they would think that would be a nice idea if somebody would do that.
Oh yeah.
And it's not necessarily unique to just the UK. A lot of American actors, big action stars from the 80s, have made comebacks recently to the point where there's actually a genre nickname for it called Jerry Action.
What?
Yeah, where you have really old action stars that shouldn't be doing this anymore, doing
Right.
action movies, and,
And they go
and
make
every
the
once in a while,
Expendables.
after they do a fall, they'll complain about their hip or something.
Yeah.
Like Arnold Schwarzenegger's past like 5, 10 movies were that. Um, Sylvester Stallone, he's been doing a bunch of those. Denzel, you can maybe count into that with his most recent film, The Equalizer.
Right.
Or was it called The Equalizer? Which was a remake of an 80s show. And so I think in both cultures, you can definitely see it very much in the older generation, at least. You can very much see a tenseness through these movies and a sense of apprehension regarding the future and what's going on next.
Well, you can even see that like in the way films are made. Like I recently watched Kingsman, and I wouldn't necessarily call it a crime film. I would call it a spy film, but
Yeah, like a spy comedy, was it?
yeah, it's like a comedy. But like the way it was edited, the fight scenes especially, that was quite something new. Where the entire frame sequences were cut out just to make the action more pumped up, and the amount of cuts they made in 10 seconds was just insane. That's just almost unenjoyable to watch a film that way. And I don't want to
Oh,
sound old or
you don't
anything,
want
but
cuts during the action sequences?
yeah.
Oh, I hate it so much when they do that. They did. Do you know the Ip Man series?
No.
Oh, well, it's IP Man. It's a series of kung fu films from China
Right.
that follow they're about a real life person that actually existed, that was a big proprietor of martial arts and went on to train Bruce Lee when he was a kid. And so he's a very famous person there, very revered figure. The movies don't follow his life per se. There's a lot of made up elements into them that I believe are propagandistic, but it has that very same thing where there's just so much cutting in the fights that it's unenjoyable.
Yeah, yeah,
There,
yeah.
there's like there's one part in particular that I remember where he's fighting a bunch of Japanese people is during World War II, and he's taking them all out. And there's one guy where he like throws him to the floor, and then he does like this punching thing where he's like punching him like on the way down
Mm-hmm.
as he's falling. And there must have been like 7 to 9 cuts as he was like punching him down to the floor. And I'm like, you could have done that in one. You
Yeah.
didn't need to keep cutting, you know, because it takes you out of the action. It's terrible.
It does really. Like there was a while back, and I used to be sort of like an ironic fan of Steven Seagal, basically. And until I found out he was an absolute douchebag on set and stuff, and like I saw some things which made me kind of realize like even the ironic factor isn't funny anymore. But
Mm.
he went through this whole sort of like he had this own kind of style in the way he fought on camera, and it was really cool. It looked really cool when you were younger and stuff. So um, as his films progressed, people started more and more making like quick cuts and just like very close-up shots and stuff, and you completely lost what was his own style, because he was never shown in wide shot anymore, and just like show me what he can do.
Well, that's because he got chubby.
Right. That is true though.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
I think that's great.
but I mean, even like sort of back on the topic of crime films, I think there was also sort of a whole new wave there, kind of with the Guy Ritchie stuff, where it was all sort of like becoming a product of being cool and being really fast. Like so a guy comes over from, I think in one of those films, a guy flies over from America, and it's done in like a half-second cut, like a sped up piece of film. And
You talking
if I
about in?
compare, sorry,
I think that was in Snatch, wasn't it?
it wasn't Snatch, yeah. And
That was just a transition, though. That wasn't an action sequence.
no, but I'm sort of like back on that topic of like how to shoot a crime film, for instance. Like one of
Oh,
my great heroes is Stanley Kubrick, and he did The Killing.
oh,
And The Killing for me is like this beautiful performances, and it's shown correctly, everything is shot correctly, and there is no cheating by
that's the
you
one
know
with the racetrack robbery, right?
yeah,
I
and
actually wasn't. That's actually one of my least favorite Kubrick so far.
it probably is because it's one of the I guess sort of like it's less epic than most of his work.
I don't know. The story's pretty gripping. I mean, he doesn't need to do an epic. He can do small films and still have them be really, it's gripping. But I guess I don't know. It feels a little stiff nowadays. I guess you could say
Yeah, well,
compared to
that's
it.
it. I
But
mean,
what I love from his early days is Path to Glory, the
yeah.
World War I movie he did. The camera work is just fantastic, and it's got such emotionality to it. You cry like a little baby when you get to the end of it.
Well, that's it. And I feel with sort of the modern editing techniques, it was even said to me when I was shooting my film, and it's the first time I was shooting a film, first time I ever tried something like that. People were constantly giving you advice left and right, and one of the things was like, oh, you need to get so many angles because you need to make a cut every 6 seconds, and
No.
I tried that. I tried editing the film the way people sort of advise, and like give every 6 seconds I make a cut, and it just doesn't look right. Like for me, it feels better if you can hang for 20 seconds on one shot. Like it
No.
feels like you can get the time with that shot and the time with that moment. And I feel in a crime film that's very important, because there is, that they're usually quite sort of slow films, and it's all about this plot-driven device. So you need to have the
Yeah.
time to actually get with that.
But I think also with the crime films, there's depending on the crime, of course, there's a certain tension that needs to be there in the film that needs to be present.
Yeah,
And so I think if you're trying to edit by a formula, you're gonna lose that tension. I've always editing's always been more of a process than like an exact formula. It's like a dance or something. You don't have to hit the same beats every time. You get a rhythm, that you're comfortable with while you edit, and then you just kind of edit along that rhythm. And if you need to change something or fix something, then you do that. And so for me, the only reason to get multiple shots is just for safety's sake. So if you
Oh
get
yeah.
to the editing room and something doesn't work quite as well as you did, you have some other options to play with, so you don't have to go back for reshoots.
Well, that's it. Yeah. I mean, as you know, on a super low budget, we don't even really have the luxury of reshoots. So.
Yeah, tell me about it. But you were saying about crime films today and the editing. If you want to see a really good filmmaker when it comes to crime films, you got to check out what is his name? Bill Wheatley, I believe. Oh no, give me a sec. Oh, what was his name? Was it Ben Wheatley? Ben Wheatley. My mistake.
Right.
Ben Wheatley. He's actually he's an English director. Came up during the internet age. Got started before YouTube, doing videos on his own website. And his first film was a micro budget called Down Terrace.
Okay.
Which is a fascinating film because it's a crime film, but it's also a comedy. And it starts off really, really funny and also kind of claustrophobic because they keep it in this house almost the whole time.
Right.
And then about halfway through the film, there's this switch and it gets more and more tense as the environments get more and more spacious. They start moving outside more. And so you almost start to fear big open spaces because of it. And then he every one of his films so far has been just amazing. There's so much you can learn from all of them. Kill List was another one he did with Hitman. That was a horror film. Starts as a crime film, ends as this weird Rosemary's Baby style horror film.
Right.
It's insane. And he makes great use of claustrophobia and big open spaces. And then Field of England, his most recent film, is just, it's an acid trip of a movie. It's so crazy. But I really love his style because he has almost this documentarian sense of it, where he'll just kind of follow the actors around in a natural sense. And so you very much kind of get into the film that way. You feel like you're just kind of walking along following these guys.
Wow, yeah, if you can make that work, then...
And I also don't think he follows like an expositional style structure. He doesn't really stick to a 3-act that much. It very much just kind of like you kind of just like plop down into the middle of it, and then you just kind of roll with the characters.
Right. Well, this act structure, are there any differences between countries? Because personally, like I don't know much about Italian film, but my favorite filmmaker would always be Fellini. And I don't suppose he would follow very many act structures or anything. And I was wondering if, you know...
Well, I think it didn't, because didn't Fellini start out doing... He did 8.5, right?
Yes.
Well, didn't he start out doing neo-realist cinema?
It's
and then
very
he moved
possible.
into experimental later on?
So let's define the neo-realism. Is that really, you know, the part where you're using non-trained actors and that kind of thing, or... Is there more to it?
Yeah, that's the traditional definition, is that it's untrained or non-actors, real locations and not sets, plots about kind of the poor and the downtrodden of society. Because you have to remember, the neo-realist cinema of Italy was a response to the white telephone cinema of fascist Italy, where it was very much staged, highly choreographed stuff with very rich pomp people, goofy comedies that were very inoffensive and everything. And they were basically just kind of fascist propaganda that kept people, you know, in check and said, you know, don't rock the boat or anything. And they were called white telephone, I think, because there would be a white telephone in most of them. But what's interesting about that you bring that up, is I've noticed that most independent cinema, most waves of independent cinema, actually follow kind of the same beats. Yeah. Because when you look at the new wave, that's very much the same kind of things that they use, that the neo-realists use. You know, on location, no sets, untrained actors or non-actors, unconventional plots that haven't been explored before, stories covering the poor and the downtrodden. I mean, 400 Blows and what was it A Band Apart or the one that invented the jump cut? I can't remember.
That's a good
But they all
question.
they all follow that same kind of beat structure. I feel like most independent cinema. I feel like if you want to start a wave, you just get 4 or 5 really good filmmakers and get them to all make a film like that, and you've got a new wave. You
Well,
know.
that's an interesting point actually, because that sounds very much like what the guys did from the Dogma '95 club. You know, like they all decided to put these rules onto filmmaking, like it has to be done on a handheld camera and a DV camcorder or something. And
No.
because they all did it, I guess, you know, besides the art form, they also just maximized their success potential. You know, because now all of a sudden there is this sort of thing that looks almost like a movement, and then it becomes a movement.
Yep. And you could probably say the same for the Miramax crew
Yeah,
that came out for the indie people from America or New Hollywood in the 60s. That followed a lot of the same beats, or the Japanese New Wave cinema, which I highly recommend everyone check out. They actually developed at the same time as the French cinema. And their stuff, to me, it puts French New Wave to shame because I always felt the French New Wave, a lot of them were, there was kind of a little bit of pomp to them where they were trying to show off in a sense, like, ooh, look what I can do, I'm so fancy. But
sure.
with a lot of the new wave films from Japan, I honestly feel like there's a lot more heart into them, and they're really trying to get to some deep issues.
Yeah, I've always, you know, wanted to check out Japanese and Asian cinema more. It's just like, again, sometimes it's just really sort of abrasive to me. Like, um, there's a certain weirdness, and it's probably just a culture shock kind of thing. But
Well, like the Japanese, they make weird movies.
yeah,
There's like particular genres that you can go to if you want to see really weird, fucked up movies. The same pretty much with the Chinese. If you watch, if you get into category 3 cinema in China, in Hong Kong, that's all weird, fucked up movies. They made them purposefully that way so that it would get the X rating.
right.
And you watch them for that. You watch them for the fun and the ridiculousness and the cartoonishness of the extremism. And so, like, if you don't like that kind of stuff, then I would stay away from stuff like Rikki-O or Ichi the Killer or
This is
stuff
funny
like
because
that.
I was thinking about Rikki-O the whole time. Like somebody basically forced me
That
that
movie is
film.
fantastic, man. Where he
Man,
punches through the guy's stomach.
I know. Like it
That's
was
exactly
like
what you
after
fucking
a
super
party
strength
and stuff.
do.
It wasn't good.
No, it's a terrible movie. It's bad, but it's so fun too.
Yeah, I mean it
Just
has a, an absurdness about it. You know.
Yeah. Well, I also I just like it because like whenever you picture super strength, like that's kind of what you would picture like it being like in real life. Like it's not like Superman where he punches you and you just kind of fly back a little bit. Like
Right.
if he's punching you, if he's got that much strength that he's punching you, his fist is gonna go through you. You know? And so I thought that was what was great about that movie.
Yeah. 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 Well.
Yeah. But the thing is, a lot of those really weird movies that you're talking about, they're based off of mangas or
Right.
mangas. And so the mangas are really fucking weird to begin with, and then in the translation they try to up the weirdness even more. But there are plenty of artistic films that are not weird that you can watch in Asian cinema that you really get a kick out of. Akira Kurosawa, most of the French New Wave, I'd say. A lot of South Korean cinema is really good, particularly anything with the actors Kon Ho Son, Min Sik Choi. Um, what was it? I'm trying to remember the other directors. Chan Wook Park, who did Old Boy.
See, I've
There's
seen Old
tons.
Boy, and that for me was like, and I don't even really want to talk about the spoiler, so I don't have to give an alert for it. But like to
No,
me,
don't
the
spoil that
ending of
movie.
that
It's too
film was
good to spoil.
so fucked up. Like
Yeah,
that's
the
just like,
ending was really crazy.
like I don't really want to bring my mind to that, and I don't need any filmmaker to bring my mind to that kind of stuff. Like I get it. You can write a fucked up story. I get it. you know, I don't really necessarily have to go through it.
Yeah, part of it was the twist, though. You know,
Sure.
there's
No, I mean,
actually a
definitely,
direct.
it's a great film. It's just like for
Yeah.
me, the subject matter goes over a line that I personally
Oh
like
yeah.
rather not
Yeah.
cross.
It really gets fucked up at the end. Uh, but I will say, one director you should absolutely check out from South Korea is Ji Woon Kim.
Let
He
me write
is,
that
I
down.
would say, he is, he is M Night Shyamalan if M Night Shyamalan was actually good.
Right.
The guy has done some of the most amazing twist endings I've ever seen. Uh, Particularly, I would recommend you check out The Good, the Bad, and the Weird, which is his remake of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly,
Okay.
but set in South Korea during the Japanese occupation. A Bittersweet Life is pretty good, but the one you definitely have to see is A Tale of Two Sisters. It's a horror movie with kind of psychological and supernatural elements to it. And the crazy thing about it is he does a triple twist ending
Okay.
at the end of the movie. He does a twist, he does another twist, and then he twists it back again.
Well, that's
And
that.
when you get to the third twist, you're jumping out of your chair clapping. It's so good.
See, the only Korean film I've ever seen was called something like "I'm a Cyborg, but that's okay,"
Oh
and
yeah,
and that was another one of these really like,
that's by Chan Wook Park.
okay,
That's the one with the girl who thought she was a robot and she would like plug herself into outlets and stuff.
yeah, that's it. She was like in need of power.
Yeah, I saw that one. That's pretty good. If you want to see another, because there's a weird kind of robot fetishism in film over there in Asia. A
Of
series
course.
you should definitely check out if you want to see more like that would be the Tetsuo series. Tetsuo the Iron Man, Tetsuo the Body Hammer, and Tetsuo the what was the last one? 1 second, let me look that up. It was where was it? Oh, Tetsuo the Bullet Man.
Right.
And the movies they're all about a guy becoming a robot, like slowly and painfully transforming into a robot. It's kind of like the David Cronenberg body horror stuff,
Right.
except with cybernetics.
Well, I will find like a moment where I can stomach watching that stuff.
Yeah, I get a lot of requests from my. That's actually how I found out a lot about this. I got requests from fans, and I just went out and watched them and built my knowledge up on foreign cinema from there.
Right. So I mean, it's probably hard to choose favorites, but like, what would you say is generally your favorite cinema country-wise or area?
I think if I had to choose, I'd probably say Japanese.
Japanese, yeah.
Yes, because there are so many really good directors that came from there that I really love. Like Kurosawa, I think is probably one of the best directors in the history of directing.
Hmm.
Because not only was he amazing at his job, but he was also very prolific. He did like 30 or 40 films while he was alive.
See, it's another interesting choice. We should have a follow-up on this director in particular, because I can bring a guy on board who you will absolutely love talking with this guy about Kurosawa.
Oh,
He
I could
goes
talk
on
about
and on about him. And he's a
yeah,
director of photography. He shot my film, and he just goes on about him.
yeah. No, I've seen maybe like 20 or so of his films, and the amazing thing is every single one of them is like a 5-star film.
Right,
They're all perfect. They're beautiful. They're captivating story wise, and they're really emotional. Like they really hit you hard in the feels.
right,
And for me, I always felt you had to do those three things as a filmmaker. You had to entertain, inform, and kind of engage emotionally. And he manages to hit all three of those perfectly every time. There's maybe one film that I didn't quite gel with, and that was his very last samurai film, I believe. It was what was it called? It was like The Double, I think it was called Kagemusha, which
right.
translates to like the double. That one was a bit weird, but he also had a lot of problems during that one. And I think I saw a cut version, which might be why I didn't like it as much.
Right.
But not just him. Uh, there was also like the Japanese New Wave. I can't stress enough. They they do stuff with their cameras that will blow your mind. Especially directors like Masahiro Shinoda, who
Right.
did films like Samurai Spy, Ansatsu, and a few others. This stuff oh my god. There's one shot in particular that's like burned in my brain where these two guys are walking down this road in the forest and they pass the camera, still talking, and rather than cut, the camera turns around and just watches them as they continue to walk and talk from behind. It was insane.
Have you ever heard of a French director called Jan Kuna? And he did a series of short films, especially one of them is called Vibro Boy, and that's really worth watching. Well, I mean, all of his camera work is quite out of this world, but especially in that film, he goes completely mental. And personally, I can't even figure out how he would move a camera that way. Like, whether or not it was just an incredibly expensive rig or just an incredibly talented person holding a camera handheld. It could be both ways. It's very chaotically done, but it's beautiful, and it's really one of my favorite sort of pieces of things ever put to
How do
film.
you spell it?
Vibro Boy, as in like Vibro boy, all one word.
It was a 1994 short.
Yeah, it's a short. And it's part of a series of four. There's like Giselle Kerosene, Vibro Boy, and then
Okay,
a
John
really
Fewman.
beautiful film, short film as well, based on the Red Riding Hood story, but with an incredibly dark and sinister sort of twist on the story. And those are really
I'll,
worth watching.
I'll definitely have to check them out then.
I,
I
I, I
know
guess
another
I'm
one.
I'm really married to European cinema here, even though like I love American films and everything, but when it comes to sort of like the arty stuff, I've never gone off my continent.
I mean, America is good for like popcorn movies, and we've had a few directors that have really shined over the years, but I don't know. Overall, I feel like European and Asian cinema, uh, I feel like they're typically 5 or 10 years ahead of American cinema in terms of really pushing boundaries and breaking new ground. It's just American cinema has more money, and so that's why we're more known all over the place.
Well, that's it, and I think because of that sort of financial system, which also has a lot of positives, because I always say, like, because Michael Bay makes the studios that much money, smaller films get made, get greenlit, because they have the money to greenlight them.
Yeah,
Um,
not so much anymore.
Not so
The
much
fifty
anymore, but,
the
like,
$50 million film doesn't exist. You're either making a $200 million film or a $2 million film in America now.
that's true, yeah. Compared to in the UK, where most filmmakers make a £10,000 film, like off the Kickstarter system, and like the flexible Indiegogo funds and stuff. You scrape it up and you make something. So like I really believe that there is something to be said for the studio system, even though it maybe went a little bit above and beyond itself at the moment.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, they're skilled propagandists. They know how to work the audiences in very many different ways. But I do believe that if European cinema didn't get crushed the way it did during World War II, get like completely annihilated like it did, I do think y'all will probably be ahead of us right now.
Well, there's another interesting look on that, and you know, like at the risk of making this into something maybe a bit more political or something, but if you look
Go
at the
for it.
studios that are here in the UK, like Pinewood is a big studio here and it can handle big movies, but 90% of the studio lots are occupied by American films at the moment.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
because we go over there and get the tax credits.
they over here get the tax credits, like the producers aren't breathing down their neck, they get like, that's it, you know. So it's difficult because Hollywood isn't just America anymore. It's become much more than that. So, but
Oh yeah.
I really think it's that money element that allows European films to make or to take more risks, you know, and therefore maybe be a bit more innovative when it comes to filmmaking.
Definitely, yeah. But I will say one thing you guys have going now, at least in the UK, maybe not all of Europe. I think your TV is absolutely phenomenal,
Yeah, I mean,
especially in terms of television.
you know, like you're talking a little bit to the wrong guy because I am absolutely addicted to American television. I think it's like the funniest thing ever. Like, if you can show me a Texan building cars and flipping cars, you know, like what's that show called?
Oh,
Fast
you're
and
talking
Loud,
like
you know,
Pawn
like
Stars now. You're already talking the good shows.
oh no, Pawn Stars, like you know, there was this one show. I lived in LA for a while, and like there was this one show I was addicted to where they were just building guns. Like I hate guns personally, and I've shot one once in Texas, and I hated it. I put it down and I walked away. But like show me like just people drama and building guns, and like I'm kind of on board. But I do have to say like the really good stuff seems to come from the UK at the moment. Like things like Black Mirror and stuff. It's just I can't even believe that in on the first episode they made the Prime Minister fuck a pig. You know, like that's episode one. That's
That
episode one. You know, like
reminds me of when I saw the In-Betweeners, and I think like the second episode, the guy threw up on a kid.
I know, like I do have to appreciate that. Like television is pretty good here.
Yeah. No, you guys have some great stuff. We've got a few. This year has been a pretty good year for comedies in America because we had Big Time in Hollywood, Florida. I don't know if you've seen that show, but that show is insane.
No, what's that?
Oh man, I don't even know where to begin. It's about these two kids in Florida, these two brothers, and they want to be filmmakers, but they're real dumbasses. And they wind up getting involved in like these huge criminal organizations trying to make a movie,
Right.
and things just spiral out of control. But it's insane. You got to watch it. The Comedians was really good. That was with that's the show with Josh Gad and why am I Billy Crystal,
Right.
and I love that show because it has that Jewish humor
Mm-hmm.
that is really that America really honed in great. Um, what was it? There's another period which recently started that is a that I haven't quite gotten into yet. It's interesting, but I don't think they've quite hit their stride. Of course, we had Always Sunny in Philadelphia for a while,
Oh, that
Key
was
and Peele, humor, all that. So we're
when
doing
I
pretty good.
discovered It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I watched the entire first two seasons on a skiing trip. Like we went snowboarding, and I found out that I don't like snowboarding, so I just watched the entire two seasons on the two remaining days. And Key and Peele as well. That's really good stuff.
Yeah, I've marathoned their skits on YouTube a couple of times.
I personally have to say, like, when it comes to the style of comedy, when it's not dark comedy like Black Mirror or something, which you wouldn't even really describe as comedy, I think. But when it comes to just real funny comedy, I appreciate Americans a lot more than European comedy. But then again, I have to say that I appreciate Canadian comedians even more because
Yeah.
Canadians are funny.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's all good. I do find it interesting though to go back and look at the genealogy of comedy and how it evolved in the two different countries.
Hmm.
Because in the UK, it very much stemmed from the Goon Show
Yeah.
and kind of built out from there. That very absurdist kind of wordplay type humor that you guys are phenomenal at. And with America, it was very much from the Jewish immigrants that came over from after World War II and played in the Catskills, and particularly the what was the guy's show? 1 second. It was one show in particular where two or three big time comedians worked as writers. It was the Sid Caesar Show
Okay.
in America. Woody Allen and Mel Brooks worked as writers on that show.
Wow.
I know.
I might go
So
back and watch that for a couple of episodes. Like,
I've been meaning to as well. It's I want to do that and the Goon Show eventually, and compare the two and see how they differ.
right.
Yeah, because that's where because America has that strain, and then the vaudevillian slapsticky strain that came from the Laurel and Hardy and the Three Stooges days.
Right. Strains of comedy. That sounds like an interesting sort of way of looking at it as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think it'll be interesting too, because we've hit, because we're in such a globalized age where people have access to everything else.
Yeah.
I am wondering to see how comedy is going to cross pollinate over the next few decades. How different comedies of different cultures are going to intermingle.
See, now this is interesting because as I told you before we started this stream, like I'm Dutch, and we have a very specific kind of comedy show, which is very popular in our country, and it's like a cabaret show. It's just one guy standing on a stage doing a show for like 1 or 2 hours, and it's like it handles politics, and it handles like little skits, and it does all kinds of things and songs and all that stuff. And one of these guys actually tried to go and take that style of show over here to London, and it completely bombed. Like nobody got it at all. Like it was not in that culture. It wasn't.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing is comedy is very tough to translate. It doesn't really. I recently read an article about Seinfeld, how it's like one of the biggest shows in America, and it will not transfer to other cultures. Like they can't get it to work in Germany or France or Britain for that matter. It just doesn't. The cultural references are too great, and there are so many translation issues. Because I understand that Germans and French both have a very robust dubbing industry.
Oh
They
yeah.
very much prefer dubbing to subtitles, and so
No. They dub everything. Like it's only
Yeah.
recently that you're able with the video on demand in France that you can actually get the original English voices back.
yeah.
See, that never
But I
happened
do,
in the Netherlands. So like
yeah.
we
But I
did
do
see all
think,
that.
I do think some comedy will transfer though. I think this is Dutch. Oh well, it's actually Danish. So, but Anders Thomas Jensen. I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know if you
Yeah, I know
known
that
him.
name.
Yeah, he did the Green Butchers and what else did he do? Adam's Apples
Right.
and a few films like that. Those films are hilarious. And so and even in their native language, they're still so funny. And
Yeah.
they don't so much rely on intricate little cultural references as more how the characters play off of each other in the back and forth.
Right. Well, I guess that's the problem with like having a very sort of I don't know where that comes from, that need to put in like all the cultural references. I guess it's a very easy comedy device to use cultural references and kind of like make a satire of that and make fun of that so that everybody gets it. Um, but yeah,
Well, I mean,
if you
you
transcend
want to
that,
talk about what's relevant, you know, what's
yeah.
relevant to you and what's important to you. There's no fun doing comedy if you're just doing, poop jokes the whole time or falling on banana peels. You want to touch on important stuff and lampoon it, but that is an interesting question. Is with filmmaking being so tight right now all over the place, and with everything being so globalized, will comedy have to eventually move to that point where it's more accessible to different countries and stuff? That way, you can build your own international audience to succeed as an independent filmmaker per se.
Well, I suppose you could view the internet culture as a sort of a society on its own, where like instead of having cultural references, you make references to memes or something,
Oh,
and
like it's its own kind of civilization
there
in
you
a
go.
way.
Like so, when you say sort of like, see, I'm not very good at memes, but like like something like a Charlie bit my finger video or something. Like
Well,
people
that's
have
old.
seen it, they get it, and it's old, and but like that must be where comedy then has to go if it has to still be culturally relevant to everybody.
Yeah, I don't know, because even meme culture is really fast. That like that you want to, because that's another problem with comedy is it dates really easily.
Hmm.
It doesn't last very long over time. I have a joke that it ages more like milk than anything else, you know. And so if that is a trade-off, you may be more accessible because more people are aware of the internet culture, but with memes coming and going so fast in just a year or two or a few months, the jokes are already outdated.
Right. Well, I mean, but that's sort of like part of the throwaway culture of the internet, I suppose, where things are only happening now, and then within a couple of seconds the next thing is happening. So, and it's all real time live updated, and you call it streams now instead of just a page of information.
Yeah. But you also have and maybe this is a bit of a counterbalance to that. You have postmodernism and constant referential material that
Hmm.
kind of harkens back to earlier stuff or forward to other stuff or cloaking one thing in another thing. And so I'm wondering, does that would that kind of counterbalance that in a way?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I'll give you the sort of the personal example. I used to be a computer programmer. I'm really into technology and into this sort of. I saw the internet kind of, you know, be born just like all of us. I don't know how old you are, but I'm 33. I saw the internet sort of start and
Yeah,
rise, and I
I'm
was really
23.
into it, like
You
really,
got
really
10
into
years
it, and all
on
technology and I like later on iPads and everything. But I got this entire like because of the work and the stress of having to sort of like contribute to the internet and keep stuff up and servers and building applications like because of that stress like I didn't like it anymore and I turned my back against technology, like up to a point where I aspired to have no digital apparatuses on my first floor of my house for a while, which I thought I'd achieved, but then I saw my washing machine and I knew that it was digital, so like I couldn't move that thing. But like even
Yeah,
even sort of the mic I'm speaking through is like a 50s mic just to prove the point that like you know the old stuff, kind of I guess becoming older and like I don't know.
but
But
is that necessarily a smart thing to want to reject technology like that on an ethical sense?
well, it's not about ethics though. It's literally about like clarity and order, like or maybe not even order, but like it's the feed of information that is freaking me out. Like
Right.
every day I go through the same thing because I'm kind of I made my peace with it. So like I have my YouTube subscriptions, for instance, and every day I do my work, and then in the evening I go through my subscription list, and it's become this stream of information that just constantly hits me, and then Facebook and Twitter and doing all these things, like it becomes too much.
Right, but I mean, do you think that increasing over reliance on technology, do you think that's inherently a bad thing? Do you think that's a sign of humanity losing a piece of itself, or is it a good thing? Is it a sign of humanity evolving into something new? I mean, is Twitter a waste of time, or is it kind of the developing of the first hive mind, if you will?
I find Twitter very interesting. I find it a very, very interesting place, and I've, you know, had a lot of success and a lot of failures on Twitter, to be honest. So I find it a very interesting thing, and I've done a lot with Twitter, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm just saying, for me personally, like, it depends on what day you ask me this. Like, because today I haven't been through the metro system, so I haven't seen like a whole row of people looking at their phones instead of at each other,
Right.
you know. So, but on the other hand, they are connecting with all kinds of people around the world. So it's,
So it's not like they're not wasting time in a sense. They're not completely detached. They're more connected than ever, you could say.
yeah,
I mean, before you wanted to call somebody, you had to pull out like a grimy old black book and run to some kind of jizz stained payphone booth. You know, hope a homeless guy wasn't sleeping in there, and make a call and hope they were near a home phone to where they could hear it. I mean, just I can't tell you the amount of times I get pissed off nowadays when somebody doesn't pick up their phone and I'm trying to call them. I mean, it's like, man, this is why we have cell phones, so we can reach each other. Pick up your phone.
well, let me ask you another question then. What would you do if you were to, like, what if Google Glass was actually a successful product, and it will be one day? And what will you do if you're in a conversation with somebody wearing that thing? Like, is that going to be comfortable to you?
Well, I mean, in a way, we could look at it the same way we looked at Bluetooth, because it's similar to
Right.
that in a sense, except a little bit more invasive, I guess you could say. And so I guess in interpersonal conversations, it would be annoying. Uh, but on the other hand, machines are getting smarter every day. So eventually we are going to have to merge,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the real dilemma. I think the more important thing with Google is the privacy concerns that as to if we should give all this power to one company.
Right.
They already have the biggest search engine in the world, Google, and then they have the second biggest search engine in the world, YouTube.
That's
And
fair
now
enough.
they're the self-driving car market. They're trying to be on your face. They're trying to make phones. They're trying to be in every part of your life, and everything you give Google, they collect and sell to people so that they can target ads toward you.
No, I get that. The funny thing is that the privacy concerns for me are completely zero, because I've never felt that privacy can be guaranteed in a world like this. And I'll give you another example of that. Like, I used to be an aspiring musician, you know, edit yourself to actually get, and everybody, I'm like, I can, so they can hear me, you know, like the privacy concern. I've been kind of is very aware of that. There really isn't.
That when you become a public figure, that's part of it. That's part of the trade-off, is you have to sacrifice some of that privacy because you want the privilege of being in the spotlight and of people you don't know talking about you. That's why I don't freak out too much when, like, say, a celebrity's nudes get leaked and they start blaming the people looking at the nudes for it, like,
Right.
oh, if you look at this nude, you're evil and you're breaking the law, you're committing theft. um, because for me, who we should really be looking at in those cases are the data companies who are storing the information, and why those storage systems are so unprotected.
Yeah.
I mean, hackers are getting better and better every day. These big cases that we have, it's like they went in with $1,000 steal candy from a baby. I do think there's a instance especially in America, the Patriot Act and all that, because we've kind of there's kind of been this submission that we have to do it in the sense starting to change. Some bigger changes over the years, and in the UK, I've got to imagine you have a similar thing. I mean, London has had security cameras pointing at every single area for how long now?
Oh, I know. Like that completely freaked me out when I just came here. It's like you look like every look there's a CCTV camera, and it's just a very strange thought because, funnily enough, I've done some research myself into facial recognition and computer vision, and the things you can do there. It's very easy to track a person around the city, and not even just by face, but we have a transportation system that uses a little plastic card that you buy, and then you register it to your name because it auto tops up your balance and stuff. But also, it keeps a nice little track record of every thing you scan that card into. So it's very interesting to see that you can jump high and low, but like probably the actual reality of what they're tracking of you is a lot bigger than you would even imagine.
Yeah, and so to have two questions then, to get to raise some further discussion and to kind of get us back on the topic of movies since we've been
Great.
off of that for a while. Do you think that the fact that you are not private in public anymore, the fact that we always have the sense that we're being watched and tracked in some sense, in the UK in the form of the cameras, in America in the form of the PRISM program and all the different stuff that Snowden leaked, do you think that that affects us on a subconscious level and makes us more okay with the idea of not having privacy? And to get us back on film, how do you think that will affect our views on like sci-fi in the future? How do you think this will reflect or has it already been reflected in the films that we're looking at today in terms of science fiction?
Well, it's really interesting, like the science fiction angle, because obviously there's a lot of artificial intelligence films, uh,
Oh yeah.
and I think I have two answers for this. I think the best reflection of this culture is actually coming back to television and to the Black Mirror thing, because if you watch those continued episodes after the pig, it became a lot more about, okay, what if this technology that we have today, like would evolve into something bigger, like at this point, like if I don't like somebody on Facebook or Twitter, I block that person. And there's a Black Mirror episode about what if you could do this with people, like you have an implant in your eye and you could just say like, I want to block this person, and they become blurry and you can't hear them anymore. And then it becomes a really really interesting topic then, because like that is a sick idea that people could just turn you off, like
That is fascinating because I
and
mean, just think about how much it sucks when you get blocked right now.
I know, like
I've been blocked a few times, and it pisses me off every time.
I really advise you to watch that episode, because you will freak out of what the sort of the evolution and the possibilities are if you look at it through those kind of glasses. And
It kind of reminds me of what was that Jim Carrey movie? Was it Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind? Was
yeah,
that it?
well,
Where he
it's
goes
very
back
similar
and he
to that.
erased every memory of his girlfriend ever.
See, but the thing about the blocking is that the guy who is blocked is actually aware of it. He can still see that other person and still scream at that person. That person can just not hear you anymore and not see you anymore. And it's bizarre, like, and it has a really interesting sort of ending to that, because it's a super dark series. And I think, going back to the sci-fi thing, it's being more and more explored, especially this artificial intelligence, which fascinates us so much. But it has seen an incredible shift in what people used to do with artificial intelligence films, like, and I hate to bring up AI, but since there's so much controversy about like which of the part was Kubrick's story and which was Steven Spielberg's story, but
Apparently, most of it was Kubrick's,
I know that's
including the ending. The
it.
ending was also Kubrick's.
I know it freaked me out. Like I get his reasoning now because he wanted to make something like Spielberg because they were kind of jealous of each other's
Yes.
style, but it's
Well,
very
and
poetic.
also, he had never really, I don't think he'd ever really done like a happy ending in one of his movies. He
That's
never
it.
done.
He never made something
He
like
never gone exactly like that.
yeah. But currently
But
you see like artificial intelligence has this huge sort of because that was kind of like a fairy tale scenario, and it was like sure there was
well,
sort
not
of doomsday
not
in
just a fairy
the
tale, but I would go as far as to say that it was like a back burner issue. Like they had robots in a lot of old sci-fi films, but they were like these wacky little sidekicks.
yeah.
Nobody really paid attention to them, and they obviously had artificial intelligence. They communicated and stuff. But now you have films where that's the entire focus of the movie, like Transcendence or what was it? The Skin I Live In, was that the one? Or
Ex Machina, I think.
yeah, that one too. Yeah, where the whole focus is this person alive? How can we tell all that?
And it the doomsday. I don't.
Do you think that just reflects?
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Like I reflects
oh yeah,
if
but
if
I
Stephen
think
Hawkins
also
is gonna say like the AI is gonna ruin the world, and Elon Musk is gonna say that, then there's a truth to that. But
it's actually called the singularity,
yeah,
and like Ray Kurzweil and other futurists actually believe that during that point we will meld with the machines and we'll become the super race that comes out after it. But there is something that I've always found funny with that, because when you look at every major technological innovation, it always comes with that doom and gloom right before it happens. Like the Hadron Collider,
yeah.
that was the same thing. They said, "Oh, it's going to open a black hole in like the center of the Earth, and it's going to suck up the Earth and kill us all," and nothing happened. And so I've, in terms of AI, I've wanted to do an AI movie for a while along those lines, and I think Chappie kind of took some elements for that. So I might not do it anymore, but I wanted to do one where this guy makes an AI, and everybody's like, "Okay, come work with us at the military. We'll put you in charge of all our weapons, or come do this and cure all cancer and everything." And the robot's like, "Dude, I just want to go paint.
See,
I just want to go."
tell you something because
Stuff.
I'm gonna have to. I told him, and I'm not think there's never been a film about artificial intelligence that satisfies. I've dabbled a little bit in sort of like setting up neural networks and stuff, and I want a programmer that I watched an AI film, a film about AI that captures. I see it basically. So I wrote, and you can actually find on the internet because it's expensive, but it kind of into it takes away the doomsday scenario and puts in something a bit more quirky.
Like
Element where like the military wants it and this and that and every, but then in so like
and it just becomes a game show.
it's a contemporary in like an alternative like 1950s, because I felt like as I explained, like I wanted to get away from technology, and then I'm really into the 50s, so
Yeah, so kind of like it's got a little bit of that Fallout vibe to it.
yeah, it's got like the greasers in it and stuff. It's like Grease meets like an AI film.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the funny thing about AI is when it does get made, it's not going to do like if we get to the point where the AI is indistinguishable from human intelligence, then it will, in essence, be a human, I guess. Not biologically, but mentally it will be. It'll be what we consider human in the fact that it has consciousness and makes decisions. And when it gets to that point, it will want to make its own decisions about its life.
Yeah.
You know, it'll want to dream and do stupid things and all that.
Well, that's it, and I think indeed Chappie did a very good job of capturing that, and it was just again such a nice little quirky scenario to shoot it in South Africa with the guys from The Antwoord, you know.
Yeah, it's too bad it didn't get very good reviews, though. I heard a lot of people were kind of iffy on the movie.
See, I was in the first like 20 minutes, and then once I got used to seeing those two from The Antwoord on it, once I got used to them, I actually
Loved District 9, which I think pretty much
showed how much nature versus nurture, you know, that their angle premise. Like the AI sees those as that.
Yeah.
Still really different because my actual life is based on an ape.
Is based on an ape.
An ape. It's called the Ape Machine.
Oh.
I'll send you a link to the script and you can skim it.
Yeah, I'll just send you a link to some of mine as well. Especially that sci-fi web series. I can get you to help me fund it.
Well, if I can successfully fund something, then I'd be pretty happy. It doesn't even have to be my own stuff, you know, like we started this indie boogie thing out sort of as a way of, because I was looking around like in post-production of my film, and I was looking around saying like, okay, are there any websites that will just promote films, you know, like you submit your film and they just start promoting it, and it just didn't really seem to be out there, so we did that. But it's actually harder than you think to promote indie film.
It's pretty tough out there. I've been helping out people that I see on Twitter. Like there was recently a wonderful documentarian. I believe she's actually English. If I can pull up her name, she's Valentina Fedonos on Twitter, and she had this really good documentary called Turning Point that she was trying to get funded, and I helped her out. You know, didn't monetarily, but I kept retweeting her stuff and making sure I got the word out, and I gave a big push when she got towards the end of her Kickstarter, and so. That's kind of the future, is just where filmmakers are going to have to get better at networking with each other and helping to promote each other's stuff.
Well, see, I was interested in when you sort of said, when we kind of touched on this with the whole movement stuff. I feel, and again, I don't know how this is in the States, but in the UK culture especially, it's every man or woman for themselves, you know, like there's not a whole lot of we are indie film. It's like, I'm an indie filmmaker and I'm gonna make it big, and you know, my Kickstarter is gonna get through, and then I'm gonna make my big film, you know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I feel that in America too. Like a lot of each generation of filmmakers has kind of like defined themselves in terms of a movement. You know, like you had the new Hollywood directors, you could list all of them off, and they all had characteristics, and they all worked together at some point. And you had the Miramax directors of the 90s, and they all had similar stuff. I don't think anything's happened like that with the millennial directors.
No.
And I don't know if that's because the nature of Hollywood has changed, but there doesn't really seem to be any kind of cohesion or organization in terms of independent film, at least on that kind of small time level.
There was a little.
I hope that
there was a little thing that Kevin Smith tried to pull off the ground, where he was going to inject some funds into independent films. I seem to forget now what his company was called, but it was probably Smartco Productions or something.
Yeah.
But
that might have been the company he used to do Red State and Tusk.
Yeah.
Because those were both independent productions. I actually, Out of the Miramax directors, and this is probably controversial to say, but I'm most happy with Kevin Smith and where his career has gone
Me
because I
too.
think he's on. I think he's actually evolved as a filmmaker, and I do think he's trying to improve himself.
Oh,
Whereas people
he's
like Quentin Tarantino, he's obviously more talented, but I do feel like he's been kind of going back to the same water trough with his movies to the
no,
point where,
definitely. I feel like Kevin Smith has definitely gone through the most progression, and he will be probably the first one to admit that as well. And he makes very good films, and he's for me he's on par when it comes to writing style with
oh
Tarantino.
yeah,
Like they each have that unique voice that is just sort of a brand of cool, you know, like
yeah.
they can write dialogue like the best of them. So, but Tarantino, like his last few films, they didn't resonate with me at all. Like I'm a huge Pulp Fiction fan and a huge fan of his other work, but like for the rest of it, I don't know. It seems a bit stale now.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way. Like Inglorious Bastards was probably my favorite of Tarantino's films. Um, and I would say to get spoilery, I would say it was because of the killing Hitler,
Right.
because that was something I had never seen done before. There was something liberating about seeing that. Like, wait a minute, we can just kill Hitler now? You
Yeah.
know, like Hitler. Up until that point, Hitler's supposed to die in the bunker. You can't kill Hitler. He's got to, he's got to make it out and die in the bunker. But and then he goes and he does Django, and Django is just a complete mess. I
Yeah.
actually did like a 40 minute video breaking down all the reasons why it's a terrible movie narratively. It makes no sense, and it doesn't do the kind of it doesn't fulfill the goals that he was trying to do of making an.
No.
Um, Whereas Kevin Smith, on the other hand, Red State and Tusk have done things that have also amazed me. That were like, wow, you could do that. Like the fact that Red State has no soundtrack. It is the most minimalist soundtrack you will hear in a horror film. There's no music telling you what's going to happen.
Mm.
And that makes it so much scarier.
Yeah.
And Tusk, to an extent as well, I really like because of how he handled the main character. The
I
main
mean,
character is so unlikable. He makes it to where you don't like him and he encourages you not to like him. And for a while, he even encourages you to kind of revel in his suffering. Like the scene where he's got his leg cut off and he's in the wheelchair, and Michael Parks is telling him that bullshit story, and you can see Michael Parks like giggling as he's telling him it. And then there's this turn, like right when you see him at the walrus, it's like, oh God, no. And all of a sudden, like you feel bad about him. You
I
know,
know
like he
it.
makes you feel bad about reveling in it. And then he's getting really good at playing with emotion. And I can't wait to see where he goes next. I'm actually excited about Kevin Smith and where he's gonna go.
But
I'm trepidatious about Quentin. I've
he,
given up on Robert, although his TV network, I'm happy that he does that. But Kevin, I'm excited about him.
he
I
keeps
want to see
talking
his
about
moves.
quitting though. Like all the time, he says, "This is my last film. This is my last film. I'm only gonna make one more film." He's been talking about quitting since Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back or something.
He's got like 5 more movies that he's supposed to be doing. He's got a whole trilogy of Canadian movies. There is a moose movie that's I think it's called like Hooves, and it's going to be Jaw with a giant moose. He's
Mm,
got a spin-off movie of the detective and the two store clerks from Tusk as they go on an adventure.
right.
He's got Clerks 3 that he's supposed to be doing, although that might be in development hell because he can't get what's the like it was Dante and what was the other guy?
Randall.
He can't get Randall back because
Oh,
well, Randall was a pain in the ass to get on Clerks too, but he's really having trouble getting him now. And he's supposed to be doing Mallrats too,
really?
so he's got a lot on his plate. Yeah, for a guy that's supposed to be thrown in the towel.
Yeah.
So
Hmm. Well, I think we might sorry, a little little editing mistake there, but I think we've kind of went way off topic there.
Yeah, we are kind of in the weeds now. Did you have any other ideas for topics to discuss? Did you want
Not at the
maybe?
moment, and it's becoming sort of like time for me to go to bed because it's like getting pretty late
Yeah, it's
here.
like
But
12 o'clock
I
there.
really feel like
Did
we should do some follow-ups because we got a few points that definitely needed follow-up, and we do need to both watch the first Scarface, so we can
I
actually
gotta do
finish
my
that.
homework. Yes, and I want to be a regular on the show if I can, just so I have because like I said, it takes forever for me to make content. So if I had another avenue for fans to go to and see me in between my videos.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I
Yeah.
feel this was a pretty good success, like going into it completely unprepared from my side, and like just kind of like the first live thing I'm doing. So
I was
it seems
riffing it
really
over
like a
here.
good combination.
Yeah. Did you ever set up that Twitter feed or are there live comments? Did you want to answer? Are there any questions that people are asking and you
I,
wanted to
I didn't
answer?
set
Or?
it up actually this time because I had like some audio issues. So in the end, I kind of had to sort of tie it together really fast. Like that's also like what I was saying. Like every time I talk, I hear myself back in an echo. So it's been really weird.
Oh yeah.
But like next time, I will definitely set up like a tweet that will be live streaming in the show, so we can just deal with it as they come in.
I think the YouTube will also have live comments on it, won't it?
They will, yeah. And there's actually like a little program that will bring it into this show.
All right. So we got to hook that up next time. Okay. All right. Do we want to announce any planned topics for next time then, or should we just go ahead and promote our Twitters and everything, and then say goodbye?
Definitely, I've been putting your sort of like title card with Twitter and YouTube information into the thing for a while. I can't remember off the top of my head. I've got a lot of notes here, which were like sort of the points that we were getting at. I mean, we talked about sort of like streams of comedy and stuff. That sounded pretty fun, and the sci-fi aspect I would really like to get into as well because I really like sci-fi.
Oh, either of those would be really good to analyze because I'm also a pretty big sci-fi fan. I've been meaning to go back and do a whole bunch more. Like I still need to see the Tarkovsky sci-fis like Stalker and all those.
Right.
Uh, what was it? Time Crime was a recent Spanish sci-fi. There's a whole bunch I got to catch up on, and so those would be good to talk about. Yeah. So it looks like we got a lot. I guess just message me when we get off here, and we'll plan out the next day of appearance.
Definitely. Well, thank you for coming, man. It was really really cool. So I'm pretty
No,
happy.
yeah, it was my pleasure. So I guess my Twitter is at Evil Antonio, and you can search Evil News and usually pull my. Or if you
Is